Welcome to the All Out Coach podcast, my friends. My name is Tim Mikhelishvili. I'm your host. We talk about performance, how to inspire engagement in our business, sports, or in our contests, competitions, or life in general. And when we consider an Olympic event, the Olympics, it's the height of our performance, as well as the engagement that people feel when they have that spirit, that Olympic spirit. Very few of us have a chance to become an Olympian, much less become a competitor in the Olympics or coach an Olympian or an Olympic champion. Well, my guest today coached an Olympic gold medalist, Sally Pearson. She has dedicated most of her life to track and field, to coaching other champions, creating other leaders. Sally Pearson won the 2012 London Olympics in 100-meter hurdles. She set an Olympic record that stood for many years. She was a silver medalist in the previous Olympics in Beijing in 2008 as well. And my guest today, Sharon Hannan, she's a director of Sports Credentials Proprietary Limited. She's been a head coach that trains not only athletes, but also other coaches. She's a franchisee at Aussie Athletics, Gold Coast North, and she's currently the coach of a rising star in athletics in 100-meter hurdles, Liz Clay, who competed in last year's Olympic Games and also in this year's World Indoor Championships. She's a life member of Athletics Australia, and today we're going to talk about what it takes to become a competitor and a champion in life, how to clear hurdles to make better and faster decisions. Sharon, I'm so glad to be able to speak to you today. I look forward to our conversation.
Thanks, Tim.
How did you get interested in this sport, track and field, to begin with?
Well, I was never an athlete. I was a somewhat sickly child, I suppose. I used to go and sit on the sidelines and support my brothers and sisters playing hockey and rugby league and other sports. But when my daughter was 9, she came home from school with a flyer, a brochure about athletic season starting up in this little country town that we'd just recently moved to. And so I took her down to the local oval and just got involved. Anything she did, I'd join committees or join volunteer workforce or officials or whatever, and just help out. So that's how and where I started.
Yeah. I'm so glad to be introduced to you by a colleague and a friend in my industry, Steve Royal, who I know you coached as well. And he's a track and field athlete who has run a very fast time as well throughout his career. How did you become a coach that didn't only help your daughter, but ended up coaching champions and even gold medalists?
Well, the year after we joined the little country club, I was working for an airline called Bush Pilot Airways, typical Aussie name, that became Air Queensland and ultimately the regional arm of Qantas in Australia. And that was on the north side of Cairns in far north Queensland. And the little country town we'd moved to was south of Cairns. And the club decided it was going to move from a Sunday morning to a Thursday afternoon after school, and I just couldn't get my daughter there. So I started a club in Cairns because the much bigger town didn't have this little athletics. It had a senior athletics club. And so we advertised and broadcast and used a lot of contacts and networks and got a club started. And suddenly I had 83 little excited people sitting in front of me. And I thought, oh my goodness, now what do I do? I know how to measure a throw in discus. I've watched other events, but what can I do from here? So I found out there was a coaching course, and I went and did that, and that was a level 1, and did level 2 and 3, and I'm a level 4. But most of my education, I firmly believe, has come from asking questions, learning about people, learning about life, just asking other coaches questions, and just having long conversations with people and athletes.
Right. And it takes a lot of observation, I think. Some of the best coaches are the ones that really reflect on the human condition. And I think being a parent probably helps with that, given that, your experience with your daughter was really what started you, right? Your interest in athletics and coaching, and being a parent is an important lesson in life on what leadership means and what coaching is as well. So do you think that you always tended to observe and be very perceptive of other people? Was there something, a coach in you that manifested later in life?
I think we're all products of our lives, and my mum passed away just before I turned 12, and I had 6 siblings, one older, the rest younger, the youngest 2. I've been nursing and nurturing the 3 younger ones for a couple of years. Mum wasn't very well, and you become, like you said, an observer of people, an observer of people who are interested in you or what you do, or people who just aren't, and you move on, spend more time with the people who offer some synergies in your life, something to assist, something you can assist. Yeah, I think I learned that from a pretty young age.
Yeah. And you must have had, a commitment to high performance, or to performing and excelling at the highest level, which you ultimately taught Olympians how to do. And you started from a clean slate, right? You mentioning those 83, young people, right? So what is the role of curiosity and really not having prior athletics experience and just looking outside of the box? What role did that have in your success as a coach?
Well, I'm somewhat timid for much of the time. So when I go into situations, I like to go in with as much knowledge and as much confidence as possible, particularly when you're looking after young children, and they want to look up to you and know that they can believe you and understand you and believe that you know what you're talking about. So education was really key for me all along my journey, and whether that was formal or informal, and much of it definitely was informal, reading books, reading biographies, trying to understand people and how they thought and how they got through situations. And probably one of the most impactful books that I read was about one of your people, Aron Ralston, in Between a Rock and a Hard Place. This guy had to cut off his arm to survive. That's pretty drastic, but impressive to read that book over and over again and see how he planned his trip and how he went about his trip, and then how he faced that adversity with processes. So I'm a big process-driven person, and that really resonated with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so methodical and systematic approach.
Yes.
Quite somewhat of a scientific approach as well.
Yeah, data analysis.
So with Sally, just kind of fast forwarding a little bit to Sally Pearson, she underwent quite a few challenges and difficulties, right? Injuries as well. How did you help her manage them using your approach or curiosity?
Yes, I coached Sally for 14 and a half years. So she was just 12 and a half when she joined my squad. And so I had a long time to get to know her body, how she reacted to different training methodologies, how she, how fast she healed when she did have little niggles, just to really understand and know the person standing in front of me as much as I could. So much, just had to learn so much about her.
And I heard that she had a navicular stress fracture, right? And you came up with an innovative way to coach her through it.
Yes, certainly. And she was pretty young when that happened. She was doing a subject at high school called dance, so she was pretty active, and somehow she ended up, with a combination, possibly of dance and athletics. She ended up with a navicular stress fracture, which was misdiagnosed for quite a while, and then we went to Melbourne, and Athletics Australia's chief medical officer, we saw him, and he diagnosed that it was, by that stage, a total fracture. So there was a fair bit of rehabilitation, and when she was walking and then jogging very slowly, I thought this girl really needs to feel speed. Like, she lived for speed. Speed was part of her DNA from when she was really quite young. So I used racewalking as a tool for her to get that fix, that speed fix. So we'd get on the track, and she was 14 at this stage, and she racewalked, and I would time her, and she would try and beat her time. Like, she might not have passed the judges, might not have passed all the rules of racewalking, but
right.
She was walking very fast with extremely low impact. So that's what I was trying to work on, make sure that she could feel speed, know speed, but without the impact of sprinting, and certainly definitely not hurdling at that stage.
Mm-hmm. And what impact did that have? Do you feel that was a successful strategy later on?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I felt it was extremely successful. And it was a segue into then to start lifting the knees a little bit and getting a bit of stride length, and therefore a bit of impact on the track, so that we could ensure that the foot was going to hold up. There wasn't going to be any repeats. She never had another stress fracture in her foot ever. So that I can remember.
You mentioned that you like to study something completely in its full detail, be prepared, because probably preparation is the best antidote to anxiety or nervousness or being timid. So if we look at the other end of that, confidence, how did you develop that confidence over time as a coach, as a celebrated, recognized coach? What were some of the turning points that gave you that feeling of confidence as a coach?
Certainly, I think across any aspects of life, I think success breeds confidence. And so as I grew up with Sally and the other athletes that I was coaching, I had a whole squad of athletes. As I grew up with them, I grew more and more confident. I wouldn't say I'm 100% confident now. I think I'd definitely be lying, but I think it's a lifelong learning situation, coaching. So you never know everything. We get bombarded with information these days on digital, platforms, and it can be mind-boggling at times. And knowing how to sift through that and pick out what's real and what's a bit of rubbish is another skill that you have in your coach's toolbox, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting statement there. So here you say that you don't consider yourself confident, even though you've coached an Olympic gold medalist and you've dedicated your entire life, and you've created so many innovative ways to train that, to me, just emphasizes how you strive for performance and improvement, regardless of the accomplishments and the feats that you have achieved in life and in your career.
I'll just pick up on something. Confidence comes from having success, as I mentioned, but every single athlete standing in front of me is a different story and a different pathway and a different background. And so incredible success with one athlete does not, in my life, mean that I'm an incredibly successful coach. I'm successful if I've gained major improvements with this girl and that boy and that young man and that young woman and all the different people standing in front of me. So, you know, you have to, being a coach of a person in an individual sport particularly means you've got to coach that person. So you've got to keep coming up with different cues, even as basic as different cues for different things for different people. One of the other things that I had started doing with a young woman I was coaching before Sally was we were doing what I call sprinting in the pool. So the athlete stays upright. There's no weighted vest. They've just got to use their abs to hold themselves upright, use their glutes to do the tiniest, weeniest little movement with the legs to keep themselves afloat and keep themselves upright, and just sprint with their arms through that water resistance. And they can, in fact, go, they can start off as a new coaching methodology. The first time they come into pool, they can be extremely slow, and their chin keeps hitting the water, and I tell them when that happens just to stop, otherwise they're going to drown. But I've never had anyone drown yet. But they get extremely fast. So they, when you're looking at sprints, for example, the average female might take about 50 strides to cover 100 meters.
Right.
In the pool, they can cover those 50 strides in about 6 or 7 seconds.
Wow.
It's just like, I still shake my head and I still marvel at it. But I have my senior squad, so those who have finished high school, so they're aged minimum 18. I still have them doing sessions 2 and 3 times a week, pretty much year round. Even in winter, I'm horrible.
Wow.
Make them get in the pool. Yeah, in winter they don't like it, even though the pool's heated. And
so is that a technique, I'm just curious, that you came up with, or was it inspired by someone else or something that you had read and you had become curious yourself about? Or
yeah, I'd seen quite a few coaches doing pool sessions, but the athletes were horizontal on the pool, so holding onto the edge, lying across the top of the water, kicking legs or whatever, or they were walking through the pool, and it was extremely slow and laborious. And speed athletes need to feel speed. So I thought, I wonder if I can put a flotation vest on an athlete and get them upright in the pool so that they could try and work much faster. And so I just experimented with a young woman who had injured her patella. So she had a fall, and so the whole upper limb and lower limb were all affected because of this patella injury. So, and eventually she got good at it, and we took the weighted vest off, and then she got extremely fast. So it's great. So it really enhances a rehabilitation program because you can put them in the water. There's almost no injury that precludes them from doing this work in the pool, except in the early 2 to 3 week stages of a hamstring injury. But if they're strong enough, they can actually hold themselves afloat with just the one leg and just leave the other leg out of the equation. So Liz did that she had a bit of a hamstring niggle, wasn't a tear, just a niggle, we call it. And she was able to do it with one leg.
Despite the injury.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Your approach to coaching, I think, combines the scientific method and the sportsmanship as well. And, I think that it's so relevant in many different fields, across life, in business, regardless of a person's background or their training. I think if we learn how to think like sports athletes or like scientists, I think these are the two most valuable mindsets to have in business as well, to continue to experiment and observe as well. So you often mention being a part of a team. And so who are the integral members of that team that helped you become successful? Helped you as well as the people that you coached, the athletes you coached?
Well, in Australia, we have in each state academies or institutes of sport, and they have scientists on staff who, once your athlete gets to a fairly high standard, and it's very selective, so they need to be at quite a high standard, then you can get assistance from the sports scientists that are employed by the institutes or academies. And so one of the first sports scientists I had exposure to was a biomechanist. And that was sort of in the fairly early days of biomechanics. And she was just fantastic. And she taught me so much. And all along the pathways, I was teaching her as well. She was learning about the sport of hurling or sport of sprinting or and that helped her as well. And then she had a baby and she and her husband moved back to the town in New South Wales where she came from. And we got a new biomechanist, and he's over in the States now. He was with us for about a decade, Dan Greenwood. He's but he's in high performance sport over there. And so they were really helpful. And right from the very first athlete who had an injury, from when I was a real novice coach, I made it my job to, if I had an injured athlete, I wanted to go to the physiotherapist with them, because I wanted to learn about how it might have happened, excuse me, and about the treatment that they were suggesting, and about how I could help and what I could observe on the track and what I could look out for to ensure that athlete had the best rehabilitation possible. So I can't always, and not for all athletes, but I ask parents of the young ones if they can suggest to the physio, could they email me a report so that I'm getting communications as well. And I develop a rapport with as many of the physios as I can as well. So, and that works both ways, because I've had athletes referred to me for coaching by physios. So, building the squad, it's a good thing. So I certainly didn't do science in high school. I did shorthand typing, bookkeeping stream. And I only did up to grade 10 that we have in Australia, which meant I finished high school at 15. So I didn't have a scientific background, but I've learned as much as I could. And my husband has always been the strength and conditioning coach for my athletes as well, until maybe 2.5 years ago. Liz Clay, who was at the Olympics last year, she found another strength and conditioning coach and a gym that was sort of smaller, more private, work better for her. And so he and I work extremely closely together as well. So again, you learn from athletes, you learn from the scientists, you learn from other coaches.
Mm-hmm. A husband and wife team of coaches and athletes. Yeah.
Yes, my husband's actually a jumps coach. He's a IAAF or World Athletics level 5 coach in multi events as well. So
yeah,
he can coach across the board. So he's very handy.
yeah. What's important also about what you said here to note, I think, is that the athletes, they often need multiple coaches, not just one coach. That many of us, regardless of whether or not we're athletes or we know a lot about track and field, I think can learn from you and your experience, and a lot of the athletes as well, you mentioned, and how personalized I think those approaches have to be, because your dedication is absolutely personal. You manage not just the athlete's performance, but their life in a sense, right? So from a perspective of not the coach, but the athlete, you primarily coached individual athletes and athletes who competed in individual events, not in teams.
Correct.
How did they consider their competitors or those in their club, let's say in their track club? What role did teamwork play in an athlete who competes in an individual event? Is it still relevant, being a part of a team and a team player? Even if
I absolutely believe so. And one of the things where I think athletics falls down really badly is in people, athletes and parents of young athletes avoiding their athletic competitors. And so going to a different squad or going to a different coach because, no, we can't go to Sharon Hannan because she coaches, Sally Pearson or whatever, and that's their competitors. And I think they've got it just remarkably wrong, extremely wrong, because I think if you want to be the best and get the best out of yourself, you train with the best. And so I've had coaches that I've coached for a few years and someone else joins the squad and beats them, and then suddenly they just leave, whether it was a grown-up person who made that decision themselves or whether it was a high school kid who themselves or their parents made that decision. And I think they were the poorer for it. I do believe absolutely that they were the poorer for that decision. Mm-hmm. If you want to be the best that you can be, because that's all you can be, the very best that you can be, then you need to train with the best.
Yeah. And if you really want to make that dream of becoming an Olympian or an Olympic champion come true, then probably you really need to know your competition well. And that brings me to that question that, many people who are skeptics, who watch a lot of very promising athletes, young athletes, and who say, yeah, they're great, but they really have to go through the hoops and many, to jump through many hoops and in order to actually reach that, that the pinnacle of competition, which is the Olympics, let's say. So what, how were you able to take your athletes to the Olympics and excel there? Not everyone did. So what are some of the key ingredients? Because I think a lot of us who are not as familiar, right, with that environment on that level, or with performance at that high level, we think that there's something else, some secret ingredient at play there, and that only few people know about. So maybe you can give us a glimpse of what you think, looking back.
I do believe there's a secret ingredient in some. And Sally had that. Sally, from an extremely young age, she was a gymnast for many years in very early childhood and doing extremely long hours each day. But she was driven, an athlete who or a young person who just wanted to do sport and wanted to beat everybody. You know, sometimes you have to temper that a little bit because they need to be extremely respectful of anyone who's better than them and do what they can do for themselves to get better. But some young people aren't that driven, don't have that single mindset of being the very best that they can be. They participate in sport to have a great deal of fun and enjoyment, and that's awesome, you know. And without that, there wouldn't be sport across the world. They must enjoy it. But as I've mentioned about me before, success brings confidence. And as they have a little success and a little bit more success, and they nail a technique they've been working on, and that's success, and all those little tiny steps start developing in them that urge and that drive to continue that successful pathway. And, you know, so suddenly you've now got a person who is extremely coachable and who is starting to believe that they could compete on the international stage. That same person could have lots of daily distractions from their social life and their aspirations to be, I don't know, in extremely social environments where they're going out a lot and having fun, and or they could be money driven. Young people want wheels. They want to have a car as early as possible. Right. So they work, you know, 2 or 3 jobs and save and buy cars at a fairly young age, or as soon as they're legally able. And, you know, so different things drive different people. So my role is just to keep planting those little seeds that, you know, you can be successful. You can definitely get to medal level in the Australian Championships. And then I believe you can get beyond that onto an international team. So it's about
so one small step at a time. Incremental progress is really the key, right? To reach the international level of competition.
Absolutely.
You know, I once shared a flight with an Olympic medalist whose lesson I remember to this day. Unfortunately, I never practiced it, even though I competed, and I was very competitive in many different sports. I do have a few trophies, but they ended at about high school stage. I didn't really go on after that. But, you know, she mentioned that she used to practice many hours a day, which to me seemed unfathomable. Because for me, I enjoyed sports and the competition and the process of it, during which I came alive myself, right? But I didn't have the discipline to practice beforehand. And so I think the commitment, what you mentioned, is the curiosity, right, and that commitment as well, that are incredibly important. The confidence, right, that you mentioned, that builds up as you succeed, and probably as you start to make those small steps, and then the preparation. Now, a little bit about the relationship between the coach and the athlete. Your relationship with Sally has been publicly, you know, discussed, and, you know, became somewhat of a, you know, well-known fact that you parted ways, and you nevertheless you continue to coach many other athletes. Can you speak a little bit about what are some lessons that you've learned and what you would recommend to other coaches in order to manage conflict with their athletes, or in order to develop relationships, you know, that lead to positive, good outcomes?
Well, given that I started coaching Sally when she was 12 and a half,
Yeah.
the relationship we had in those early years and through that 14 and a half years definitely evolved and, you know, became internationally successful and changed at the same time. So towards the last couple of years, there were some behaviors that I didn't think were appropriate given the status of the person and how young athletes really looked up to that, and how communication changed between us on a daily, you know, in our daily training environment as well. And, you know, I think it was more so instigated by the change of being an athlete who was hunting for success and then an athlete who became the hunted. You know, so everyone else was chasing Sally Pearson.
Yeah.
Because the year before, so she got the silver medal in Beijing, and the year before the Olympic Games in London, she won the world championship in Daegu in so close to a world record time, but it was a championship record as well. And, you know, she was the pinnacle. She was the best in the world across, you know, the years that it took her to work up to that and then to hold. And in Australia, there was so much pressure on her, or she put a lot of pressure on herself to repeat. And with that came a lot of anxiety and distress.
Yeah.
Not just stress, but distress. And so it was very hard to keep Sally somewhat calm and just focused on herself.
I see.
And yeah, ultimately the relationship broke down at the end of 2013.
Mm-hmm. That must have been, of course, quite stressful and you know, frustrating for you. How are you able to recover yourself as a coach, as a coach also with a long-term vision, driven by performance, to continue to coach others and you know, create a legacy, create other champions?
I actually don't think that it really affected me personally.
Oh, I see.
In my daily work, which is coaching, you know, and other things like coach education, managing an athletics track, all of that sort of stuff. I just love what I do. And, you know, like I said, every athlete standing in front of me is an individual, and I believe I'm coaching individuals. They might all line up beside each other and I might say set boom, and they'll all take off. But, you know, everyone's an individual. So I don't think I suffered terribly much, but me as a potential coach for others probably in their mindset suffered a little. You know, some people might have chosen not to come to me for coaching because, you know, I'd broken up with Sally Pearson or whatever. I don't really know. And that's not something that I've dwelt on, because that's not something I could really change. People will make up their own minds. But in 2016, so 3 years later, Liz Clay moved up from Sydney and, you know, left her family and all her friends and moved to the Gold Coast and chose me as a coach. So she was already, you know, in her 20s, and I think that spoke volumes of both her her decision making and her respect for me as a coach. So we've been together 6 years now, and she did also compete in Eugene this year. But she was involved in the carnage that was the women's hurdles, and has since had surgery and a few fractures in that foot and 2 dislocations as well. And it's going to be a long road to recovery, but she's absolutely committed.
Yeah. So I know it may have not been the most pleasant question to ask, but looking back, I'm so glad that you provided some clarity, which brings out loud and clear your commitment and your character, your strong character as a coach, and the passion for what you do throughout the years. Did you find yourself being someone who challenges athletes as well? Because my hypothesis is that the people that love us most or that are closest to us are the ones that probably challenge us the most and make us probably sometimes most upset as well. So do you see yourself as a coach who is strict and who challenges athletes more than others and asks the kind of questions that others won't? Or
I don't know about strict. Some people have told me they're scared of me. I have boundaries and rules, particularly with the younger ones. And I think that's important because some of them don't have that at home and some of them do. And, you know, like I'm pretty famous across Australia for one of my rules, and that's if an athlete breaks in false starts in training, their session's over. They have to walk. And last year or like the year before, I had a young athlete left my squad because she'd broken twice in a matter of a few months, and I said, that's it, session's over. The second time, same as I said the first time. And she and her family decided to go find a different coach, which is their call. That's their prerogative. But I think you've got to coach the event, and if you false start in a race, you're disqualified. So I just align my guidelines. I've coached athletes who I sat down and had lengthy chats to about their long-term girlfriend who lived about 1,000 kilometers away where this athlete used to live until he relocated. And I said, come on, Brendan, you really need to be thinking about your future, not just your athletics, but, Nikki's not going to hang around forever. You need to decide whether you're going to marry her or not. He said, I am. And I said, well, do it now.
Yeah.
So that was pretty blunt, but yeah, look, you do definitely have influence and a big part in some athletes' private lives, because they talk to you about so many aspects of their lives. And I've had athletes coming to me crying about something that happened at home, and I've just tried to just explain the parents' take on the situation and the parents the way that they looked at a situation. I've had parents come to me and say, look, my child is just not putting in the study for their schoolwork. We know they can do better. Their grades are going down. They've become obsessed with athletics. And so we're going to start using training as a takeaway. So if they don't improve their grade, or until they improve their grades, we're not going to allow them to come to training. And me as a mum and a grandma, how can you fault that sort of decision-making process where we're in a knowledge world and we have to work really hard to learn as much as we can, regardless of whether the kids think that maths is important. They're not going to use algebra. Mm-hmm. It's important that they use their brains and they learn to take in knowledge, retain knowledge, and regurgitate knowledge. So, I don't have a problem with parents using training attendance as something that they can withhold until behaviour improves. And yesterday had a young girl qualify to go to our state championships in long jump and in the 100. And she missed 2 months of training this year because of that, not because of her grades were going down, but because she'd been misbehaving. And so the parents withheld training, and we talked about it yesterday, and she said, I'll never do anything like that again. I'm a good girl now. And I think incredible life lesson from the parents, and they definitely have buy-in from me as well, because you've got to be a good person in this world first and foremost before you can be an athlete.
Yeah, wow, yeah. Just brilliant words there, words of wisdom. Sharon, you mentioned your daughter being a mom. I'm very curious to see if your daughter continued on her path to becoming an athlete, or you had invested so much time into so many athletes and young athletes. How about your daughter? Just curious, is she in any way associated with athletics? How about that?
She loves athletics, and particularly her oldest daughter is obsessed with Mondo Duplantis. Discovered him during the 2021 Olympic Games and has followed him ever since.
Oh, the pole vaulter.
Yes,
right?
yes.
The world record holder. For those, see, I followed track and field. Not everyone may follow track and field on the All Out Coach audience, but yeah. So your granddaughter may become a pole vaulter.
No, she's just personally obsessed with Mondo and just his moves over the bar and how he gets up there and how he seems to be able to do it so easily. No, unfortunately, I have 3 grandchildren, and our grandson hasn't so much played sport for quite a few very good reasons, but the 2 girls have played sport through school, basketball, volleyball, hockey, gymnastics, because sport is part of the ethos of the boarding school they came down to, and that's where I'm head coach of athletics and cross country at the moment. But the youngest is only in graduation year from high school this year, so she graduates in a couple of months. Mm-hmm. So who's to know whether she'll carry on with sport? But they all helped us in the business with major events. Some of your listeners may have even sent one of their children to Australia with a group called Down Under Sports, and we ran the Down Under Championships in Australia for 19 years until COVID. It was a huge event in the 2019 or 2018. There was over 300 American high school kids who came out. And interestingly, Emma Coburn, who's your world-famous steeplechaser, multiple champion, she ran her first ever steeplechase event at the Down Under Championships in Australia. At the 2013 World Championships in Moscow, I was in a lift at our team hotel, and a group of American athletes got in the lift, and this one guy said to me, Australia? Oh, actually, I won't even try and do the American accent. And he said, Australia? He said, I've been to Australia. I've been to Brisbane. And And he said, I competed there at the Down Under Championships. And I said, well, you landed in Brisbane, but you actually came to the Gold Coast for the Down Under Championships. And yeah, he was doing high jump. So in my retirement, when I sit back, I'm going to go through all my results from all the Down Under Championships and all the American results. I'll Google every one of them, and I'll work out how many American high school kids who came out for Down Under ended up on the world stage. I think that would be a very good little research project.
Oh, okay. There you go. That's the approach to have to be successful and to pass on these lessons, I think, to the other coaches as well who are listening here, I think, to us. And, keeping track of those records. I remember when I was probably 8-9 years old watching the Olympics, and these were my idols. A lot of the track and field athletes, Carl Lewis, back in the day, of course, and many others. I used to measure my long jumps. I would always have a tape measure. I still do that today with my children, right? And find all kinds of different interesting ways to kind of inspire them to finally jump over a mat. Like telling them to imagine that there's a dirty puddle over it, and just try to fly. And I actually recorded that. As a result of kind of saying that, she probably, my daughter, she broke a record. And to this day, we actually I have them run 100 meters in the mornings, and they track their personal records. I make them do that in their notebook. So I don't have the athletics background, but at least I have that coach's mentality, Sharon, that I'm trying to pass along to my children. And so who knows if my dream of becoming an Olympian hasn't come true, maybe theirs will.
A couple of things I didn't respond to in your previous question. My daughter was a race walker, and ultimately she got pubis synthesis. So at the joining of the hips where the pubic bones have cartilage between them, that became inflamed and long-term inflamed. It wasn't diagnosed for quite a while, so she ultimately had to give up race walking. But yeah, she loves watching athletics, and she went to America on an Australian tour group similar to Down Under Sport, which is now reinventing itself as coast to coast athletics over there, and they're going to bring out a group next year again. But she went to America, and she got to meet Carl Lewis at the Mount Sac relays. So there's a little bit of a tie in there as well.
Oh, wow. Yeah. In sports, I think injuries and excelling in performance are hand in hand. And there's the lines are so blurred between them, and that also is something that I've observed for many years. There's such a short kind of distance between an injury, I guess, and success. One thing that I wanted to mention to you is that my interest in my love for track and field dates back many years, as I mentioned. But coming to New York, I used to attend the Grand Prix every year, and I would always get the front row seats. And one year I had the fortune of witnessing Usain Bolt's world record, right? Wow. 9:72 in 2008. Yeah, which I still remember to this day. So I tell that to my children all the time. So now they tell me that they actually got a chance to witness Duplantis's world record. So they're kind of, that's their response. Sharon, I've really enjoyed hearing a lot of these nuances, these details that to me, they were absolutely inspirational. I think you bring in a perspective of how to draw that competitiveness inside of you, become more confident with success, be committed, and also be curious. Right. And I think those are the 4 C's that you told me about. Is there a final message that you would like to share with those who are going to listen to this discussion, who are coaches, who may be aspiring coaches or athletes, or who may not even be athletes, how to, excel in whatever it is that you do, improve your performance, and also your relationships as well with others?
Use as many mentors as you can.
Okay.
You know, just talk to people. They might not even, or you might not even realize at the time that they're mentoring you. But if you're asking someone a question, then you're learning. And to me, if it's a coach, it's mentoring. If it's a life question you're asking, you know, if you've got something you can't quite work out and you're asking someone, it's mentoring. So it's advice, it's enhancing your skills across everything that you do and say, I think.
Personally, I can tell you that I've gone from measuring my long jumps, and those are my daughters, to measuring performance in the pharmaceutical industry, in the medical affairs function, where performance is not always measured with numbers and words, but rather communicated via pictures, which leaves a lot to interpretation. And that's what I'm trying to change with the company that I formed, Amadea Pharma, where I'm helping other organizations inspire future performance and also measure it using a medical productivity index that I've created. So for me, you know, an inspiring performance is ever so critical today in a fast-paced environment and business environment, and our industry as well. So I really look forward to your lessons, which are relevant to many of my colleagues as well, in our upcoming Medical Affairs Innovation Olympics, in which you'll be a keynote speaker. And I'm ever so grateful to Stephen Royal for introducing me and to bringing me that much closer to that lifelong dream of being in an Olympic through listening and living through your experiences there. So let's continue to stretch.
Sportscredentials.com.au. You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.